This past week, and I think this is just how God works in my life, and when I'm looking for something poignant about the scripture for this week, something always comes up. So there is this place right down the block from our offices that serves breakfast. And so I go there every single morning, all the time. And this time when I come in, I get my little bowl of fruit and my grapes, and I get some iced coffee, and I'm getting ready to leave. And you have to wait in line because it's New York City and there's always a line for everything. So you have to wait in line in order to pay for your fruit, which they, weigh by the pound. And by the way, just so you know, grapes weigh more than almost anything else. So you want to get less grapes because they're very expensive. It's amazing what you can pay for a little thing of grapes. But as I'm waiting in line, the gentleman comes in and he's walking in, and behind him comes a man, who obviously is impoverished. He has socks on his feet, and he is walking behind the man, and he's, you can tell he's disheveled, and he's sort of shuffling along. And so as they come in, one of the women behind the counter comes out and says, listen, you don't belong here. You need to leave. You need to go outside. You're not. We told you before. You could hear this. We told you before. You're not allowed inside. The gentleman in front of him, who is dressed in a suit, turns and says, "No, you don't understand. He's my guest." And so, he brought him in. I'm not sure if he intended to do that or not, but he ended up paying for his breakfast. And as he walked in and walked around, the example to everyone else who noticed that and saw that, and also because now he, the man very well dressed, is walking with him from food station to food station, saying to him, "What is it that you would like for breakfast? And oh, by the way, why don't we pick you up a sandwich for lunch?" And as they're walking up and down the aisles of the hot food and the cold food area, everyone is watching him, And so as I was leaving, they were rounding the coffee section. So I'm assuming that he, picked up some coffee and on the way out. And I was thinking to myself, how many of us would see the man? How many of us would see him, with the eyes of our heart? I asked Marcus, because I was sort of inspired coming in today. There are two ways of seeing. Coming here today, we were out in Jersey visiting friends, and it just absolutely stunning, mountains and, plenty of trees. And it was just a gorgeous morning driving in. And, there's clearly what you see with your eyes, but there's also this feeling you get when you're driving along like that, and you feel nature, you feel God's presence in nature, you just sense it, you just know. And that's because something inside of us is seeing. It's not just the eyes, and it's not our head processing what we see. It's really truly the eyes of our heart that sort of get really incredibly powerfully stimulated and motivated. And I'm thinking that gentleman at that point in time, he wasn't looking with his eyes. He didn't respond with his eyes or his head, because for most of us, I would dare say, we don't want to get involved. We wouldn't want to, get involved. What if, we cause a ruckus, right? All that. But this gentleman saw value in him and recognized him with the eyes of his heart. And that action caused everyone else in that place to think twice for the rest of that day, And maybe as long as it is for me, because it happened a couple of days ago, where you ask yourself, would we be that quick? Would we be that quick? Would we see with the eyes of our heart, and would we tend to his need? Would we cover for someone like that, even though we don't know them, or we don't have any obligation, or we don't feel we have any obligation? We don't feel like we have any responsibility. The problem with the prophet Jeremiah, that Tom read is, the prophet is coming and gently saying, look, God's not really happy with what you're all doing. And so we get these names, Zedekiah and kings and all this stuff. And we got lost in the blur of the names. But the reality is what Jeremiah is saying is, look, God's not incredibly happy about the way you're behaving. God's not happy with the way and the choices you're making. And so things are going to happen that are going to shake you up. And when they do, recognize that God is even present in the midst of you getting shook up. In the very same way here, this man has Lazarus at the door, and he can do something about it, but he chooses not to see. And then ultimately, in the end, who does he recognize from his torment? He sees Lazarus. From his perspective, because this is now a story where the tides have been changed, now, because he is in that position, he is able to see and to recognize Lazarus, and ironically, reaches out for help. Isn't it intriguing that Lazarus never asks for anything? He never asks for help. He never asks for food. He's just there. He's present. But yet the man, once things start going difficult for him, he finds himself crying out to anyone he possibly knows to help him in his difficulty. And then ultimately Abraham says, we can't. It's already been set. The chasm is set. And then Luke, writing after the resurrection, is making a very clear point. There are guidelines and directions that have been set down by Moses and the prophets and Jesus as well. Jesus is risen from the dead. Then why aren't we fully living what it is that he has commanded us to live? Abraham's point is, look, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they're never going to listen to one, even if he should rise from the dead. And Luke's talking about Jesus. And so for us today, as we're all sitting here very awkwardly, it's not just about material riches. It's not just about money. We always get stuck there, and we say to ourselves, well, I'm on a fixed income, or, I give 10% to the poor, or whatever the head games we play. That's not the point. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying in each and every instance that we see with the eyes of our heart that this other person is Jesus to us, that we should be engaging and we should be helping to whatever degree. And that could be something as simple as a smile, a word of encouragement, letting them cut in front of us in traffic. I mean, there are simple things we could do to allow and make the world, just a much better place. And why are we doing that? Because we recognize that that other person is us. Most importantly, what is it that Jesus says? If you've done it to one of them, what? You've done it directly to me, not to some image of me. Jesus makes himself everyone who is poor, whether that's physical, emotional, psychological, whatever the points are, whatever we reek with in humanity. But let's also talk about this too, because just real quickly, I don't want to just be running after this and saying it's just about the poor. We have to ask ourselves too, how do we help the rich man? Those of us who consider ourselves rich in whatever way, shape, or form, how do we help ourselves not be blind and ultimately not to be indifferent? Because that's the sin. The sin is indifference. And so I think the challenge for us is, yes, sometimes we are, the rich person, but also sometimes we're the poor. The rich people, we need to, in whatever aspect of our life, we have to recognize that, we need help and assistance, and we should be looking for opportunities to give. And sometimes for the poor who are in our life, for those who are stumbling and struggling along, they're to remind us that they're the ones that we should be caring and tending for as well. So this is just one of those stories that Jesus comes out, and I can assure you the Pharisees and the Sadducees and everyone who was sitting around Jesus the first time, they didn't like this story. And each and every one of them saw themselves as the rich person. I also sometimes think that we're the poor person. And sometimes we're that person who we find ourselves sitting on the side of the road. And if there's anything in this story, I think that's important for that view and for when we are struggling, when we do have difficulties, is that ultimately in the end, what happens to Lazarus? He is delivered how? By angels, to Abraham's bosom. By angels, lifted up and delivered by angels to heaven, which means that God never forgets us, even when we're stumbling and struggling along as well. God bless you. Hi, just wanted to thank you so much for watching the video. We hope that what you're coming away with is inspirational and a guide for your life. We're really glad you could be part of our community. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can be continually updated with our new music videos, our new sermons, our new services that are published, so that you could stay connected with us. Thanks so much again. God bless you.